Welcome to Plain Civics. Thank you for joining us. I'm Joe Ulery.
And I'm Bobbi Fisher.
Our goal is to break down how government works so you can make the government work for you. So do we have a few more things to tie up from the Constitution?
Oh, we have several.
Okay.
Yes, and we're not going to get them all done today.
But before we get back to the Constitution, it is time for the Fast Five.
And it's my turn to ask you.
The Fast Five.
Number one, what's a moment in your life you will never forget?
September 11th, 2001, I was on the air in Logansport. We're in Logansport right now at the public library. And I remember the AP bulletin came across that a small plane had hit one of the World Trade Center towers in New York. And I think we had taken a commercial break for weather, and I read it when we came back. And then boom, 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 it started happening. And I felt a duty to stay and report. But I have to tell you that for the first time in my life, I felt this, I don't even know how to describe it. I felt unsafe and unsure of what was going to happen. It's like people talk about when President Kennedy was shot. What were you doing? September 11th was definitely my moment.
And this is supposed to be about you, but yeah, they came around in school and told us to turn our TVs on, because we had Channel 1 TVs, and we actually got it on in time that, sadly, my students got to see the second plane hitting the other tower. All right, number two. What's your favorite dramatic movie?
I had a couple. I wanted to say The Notebook, but I love The Color Purple.
Good.
I love Whoopi Goldberg in it, and I love Oprah's character in it. But I think the overall telling of the story should be an eye-opener for us.
Number three. What is the most random thing on your bucket list?
I wanted to say, and I told you this before we started, that I wasn't sure I even had a bucket list, so I don't know. I guess maybe I do. I just haven't organized
I
it.
said it's just things you think you might want to do.
I think my answer will amuse you. The most random thing on my bucket list today is to start therapy. You're always asking me too, did you make that call? And I'm like, I'm going to get on that. So that is the most random thing I'm going to get. That is something I need to happen this calendar year.
Right.
All right.
Number four, if you could go back to your high school graduation and choose a different career path, what would it be?
I would choose the same career. I would. If
Really?
I would have a clearer path of how I was going to do it. But I love what I do. And I have a passion for journalism. I have a passion for sharing factual information. And I don't see me doing anything else.
That's cool. So last time you asked me about my pets, so fair game here. Number five, tell me about your pets and their names. I just am amazed by their names.
Well, and they never get called their names because they all have nicknames.
Well, mine often don't either.
Yeah. So, there's a long story in how we ended up with 4 dogs, but we have 4 dogs. We have an English Springer Spaniel, and she is now 13 years old and still doing fine. Her name's Ruby Sue. She was named after Ruby Sue in the movie Christmas Vacation.
Okay.
She's liver colored, and I thought Ruby. I don't know how we got there. And then we have 3 miniature dachshunds, and they all are just very unique, but their names, and the oldest, his name is Copper Todd, and he's named after Copper Todd from the Disney movie Fox and Hound. So the best friends, the Fox and the Hound, their names were Copper and Todd. Then we have Petey Redford, and Petey's named after the dog in Little Rascals. And somehow he got this middle name Redford, because we always give our dogs middle names. So we've got Petey Redford, and then our youngest was supposed to be Dad's dog. We bought him for, my mom passed away, and we were afraid when Dad's dog passed that he was going to want another dog. So we got a puppy and trained it and got it potty trained and stuff. And then Dad's like, I don't want another dog. I want to be able to go golfing and not have to worry about the dog. So we ended up keeping it, and his name's Carl Redford. We've started the Redford line, but his original name, and I guess his given name, is Harley, but I just didn't want to be yelling Harley constantly out the back door, so we somehow changed it to Carl. And I will post pictures of them. They're the most darling things. They're the biggest joy of my life.
Well, 2 of them always come to me.
Petey, Petey loves you, and he's kind of cat-like too. But he doesn't like many people, but he loves it when you come by to visit.
Yeah, I figured there had to be some rhyme or reason to
you
their
were
names.
hoping. Yeah. All right. right. So check out our Facebook page, Plain Civics, for more information on that. It's time for us to get back to work. Bobbi.
And now our feature presentation.
In the last episode, we discussed issues with the new Constitution that concerned the anti-federalists, those who were against ratification of the new Constitution. We covered their concerns with the necessary and proper clause. And today we're going to look at one of their other big concerns, which was the general welfare clause. So the general welfare clause is found in Article 1, Section 8, Clause 1, which reads as follows. This is from the Constitution. The Congress shall have the power to lay and collect taxes, duties, imposts, and excise, to pay the debts and provide for the common defense and general welfare of the United States. But all duties, imposts, and excises shall be uniform throughout the United States. End of quote. So this is a key clause that enables the federal government to collect taxes and spend money for the common defense and general welfare of the United States, or in simpler terms, it allows Congress or the federal government to fund programs and initiatives that are meant to promote the well-being of the nation and its citizens, but not just specific groups or individuals. This clause has been interpreted to encompass a wide range of issues, including economic, social, and health-related matters for our country. This power has been used to create programs such as Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid, just to name a few. This clause is not a grant of unlimited power, as it is only related to the taxing and spending power of Congress. So that was one argument, the Federalists used, is this it's not giving Congress unlimited power in every one of those enumerated powers they had, but only in the taxing and spending power that they have. Even today, some critics argue that this power gives Congress too much power to exert over funding and control over how states use federal funds, and sometimes the federal funds come with, quote, strings attached. There's an argument to be had there, but we're not going to get into that now. But there's validity to that.
Education gets federal dollars, right?
Right.
So in order for schools in various communities and states to get those dollars, they may come with stipulations that the schools have to agree to, right?
Exactly.
So that's one example of.
Right,
okay.
right. And, of course, schools, as that example, also get funding from their states.
Yes.
But some of the programs are federally funded. So, yes, they have to follow those regulations. So there have been different interpretations of this clause over the 236 years under this Constitution. In regard to the necessary and proper clause and general welfare clause, many constitutional scholars think that these vague clauses have allowed our government to successfully deal with various issues that have cropped up over the last 236 years that were unforeseen in 1789. These have allowed the Constitution to be a living document that doesn't have to be thrown away and created anew every time Congress faces a new issue that isn't specifically mentioned in the Constitution. In my mind, this was brilliantly done by the framers. If you think of the Articles of Confederation, it didn't work and they just had to throw it out. There wasn't really a way to fix it.
Can you imagine if we had to start over look how long this process took and how much deliberation went into it. What happens to the country when they're taking 2 or 3 years to...
They're realizing times would change.
Yeah.
And different things would happen that they just had no idea about.
Brilliant is a good word to describe their minds.
Some other closely related terms you may have heard are common good and common welfare. The common good and common welfare are often used interchangeably, but they can have slightly different nuances. In essence, they both refer to the collective well-being and interests of a community, but the common good often emphasizes a more personal, shared, communal aspect, kind of how we feel about each other, I guess would be a good way to say it, while common welfare focuses more on the government's role in promoting the general prosperity and well-being of all of our citizens. So when they say they're doing something for the common good, they're probably, if it's the government talking, they're probably thinking in terms of COVID-19, for example. This is something that's going to help
everyone,
the nation as a whole. All right, here's another biggie. What is meant by habeas corpus?
Yes, answer that, please.
We have heard the term off and on in the news for the last couple of months. Usually it goes many years before, you don't hear a thing about it, but it's been brought up and has attempted to be used by the current administration. Habeas corpus is addressed in Article 1, Section 9, Clause 2 of the U.S. Constitution in a section known as the Suspension Clause. It states that the privilege of habeas corpus, quote, shall not be suspended unless when in cases of rebellion or invasion the public safety may require it. End of that quote. And suspending habeas corpus is only supposed to be ordered by Congress. Notice I said it came from Article 1, so it's part of Congress's authority. So I still haven't really told you what it means, but we're getting there. With habeas corpus in effect, it limits the power of the government to suspend the right to challenge unlawful detention of an individual. When suspended, that means individuals can be detained without a court order or a hearing to determine if the detention is legal. This can lead to prolonged detention, even indefinitely, without any legal review to ensure detention is justified. The term habeas corpus is actually a Latin term, which literally means you should have the body, but literally it means we command that you bring the detainee to court in person.
Everyone gets their day in court.
Exactly. The idea and the use of habeas corpus has been around since before the Magna Carta, which is Latin for the Great Charter, which was written in 1215 England as a document that first guaranteed certain rights and liberties to the English people, which, if you think of that in reverse, it was the first time they restricted the monarch or the king or queen's power, and it established the principle that even the monarch or the king or queen was subject to the rule of law. It also established habeas corpus as a right. So this is something that goes way back in English common law, which is obviously what most of the framers were familiar with and what many of the states had established in our own country before the U.S. became a country. So this was not something new that they created. It's something that was expected. So habeas corpus means you have a right to know the charges against you. So habeas corpus is a legal writ that allows you to challenge your detention, requiring law enforcement to produce the prisoner before a judge and justify their confinement. It means that a person may not be subjected to any legal proceeding, such as arrest and imprisonment, without sufficient evidence having already been collected beforehand, because it must be available for exhibition at a public hearing within hours or at most days after an arrest. Any charge leveled at the hearing thus must be based on evidence already collected, and an arrest and incarceration order is not lawful if not supported by sufficient evidence. A writ of habeas corpus means that a formal order has been given to someone in authority to present the person to the court to see if they're being lawfully detained. So let that sink in a minute. The judge presents the writ to the jailer or whoever is holding the person and says, bring that person to the court. You have a right to know what you're being charged with, and they need to already have any evidence that they can submit at that time.
They have to have a reason to hold you. We're in the shadow of the Cass County, Indiana courthouse where I sat for so many initial hearings, bond hearings, plea arrangements, trials, and all of that. You had to have probable cause to detain somebody, and the judge then had, or the prosecutor in the process, had to agree that you have collected enough evidence for there to be a reason for you to defend it. You had to go into a courtroom before a judge and defend that.
And that kind of brings us, you mentioned the word process. The writ of habeas corpus is a crucial part of due process. While they are distinct legal concepts, habeas corpus acts as a fundamental safeguard for due process, particularly when it comes to challenges to detention. Now, due process of law, which is, I'm sure, a term that all of you have heard, but may not understand completely, but it is guaranteed in both the Fifth and the 14th Amendments to our Constitution. It ensures fairness and justice by requiring governments to follow established legal procedures and respect fundamental rights before taking away a person's right to life, liberty, or property. In essence, it means everyone is entitled to a fair hearing, a chance to defend themselves, and a just outcome when facing legal action. Due process protects individual rights, including the right to a fair trial, the right to be informed of charges, and the right to present a defense.
And if I can jump in, just out of curiosity, who in America is entitled to due process?
So due process, the protections again are enshrined in both the Fifth and the 14th Amendments, are afforded to, and this is actually actual words from those amendments. All persons.
Everyone here.
Everyone within the United States, including both natural persons, which means citizens and non-citizens that are here legally, and legal persons such as corporations. Even if you're a non-citizen, you're still a natural person.
Right, you're a person.
So it doesn't matter if you're legally a citizen or not. You are entitled to due process. This means that anyone can be deprived of life, liberty, or property by the government, but only after a fair process that follows these established legal principles. So again, it doesn't matter if you're a legal citizen or not, you still have the right to due process.
Does that go back to the word inalienable?
Exactly.
Now, I want to ask you this, too, because I know if folks are watching the news right now, courts are involved when it comes to suspension of habeas corpus. So, and maybe you alluded to this earlier, but wasn't there some controversy surrounding this and President Lincoln during Civil War times?
Yeah, and most everybody, if you went, through school in 8th grade at least, and probably high school, you probably remembered hearing about habeas corpus then, because Lincoln suspended habeas corpus close to the beginning of the Civil War. And again, remember I just said it's Congress's right to do that. But Lincoln saw it as a way to protect public safety in the North and to protect Union property from Confederate sabotage, because Washington, D.C. sits in the middle of what were two of the southern states, one, Virginia, that had already seceded. And so it was a Confederate state, and he did suspend it without congressional approval, but Congress did eventually authorize the suspension of habeas corpus.
Retroactively.
And the courts eventually said it didn't need to be done. So it was kind of like, he did it and then sought forgiveness afterwards. But it was determined that it was probably the right thing to do because basically of the location of our nation's capital.
Yeah, that makes total sense.
Right. Hopefully that clears up habeas corpus
that helped a lot.
For everyone. Now we're going to jump to the Preamble to the Constitution, a set of 50-some words that most people probably have heard all of, or at least part of, many times, but never really stopped to take the time to think about what are they actually saying in those, I think it's 53 words.
We, the people of the United States, in order to form a more perfect union, establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense, promote the general welfare, and secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity, do ordain and establish this Constitution for the United States of America.
Let's start with we the people. This is a reference to the sovereignty, or sometimes it's called popular sovereignty, of the people. So what do those words mean? Sovereignty refers to a group or body of people that have the supreme power or authority. So if you think about it, that's supposed to be the whole concept of our our government, is that we are the authority. So sovereignty lies with the people. Now, sometimes, especially as you go on in our history, like in the 1800s, before the Civil War, you hear the term popular sovereignty a lot. And that's just an extension of this. It's a political theory that the authority of the government comes from the consent of the people, not a king or a single ruler. It means that ultimate power resides in the people. It goes on with the governments are created and sustained by the will of the people. This can be expressed through various means, including elections and other democratic processes where citizens choose their leaders and participate in decision making.
So moving on, why did we need to form a more perfect union?
This is a reference to creating a stronger and more unified nation under the Constitution, as opposed to what many felt our nation was like under the Articles of Confederation, that we weren't a strong nation. I think we mentioned a few episodes ago in the Whiskey Rebellion, but really Shays' Rebellion showed the extreme need or weaknesses in the Articles of Confederation to deal with things that were happening, like between the states, and the war debts of the Revolution that the states were left to incur. All of that kind of came together to show that the government was weak under the Articles. It was not unified. States thought of themselves more as separate entities rather than being part of this nation as a whole.
United.
So that would be the form of a more perfect union. Establish justice means the government will work to ensure fair and equitable treatment for all citizens. Ensure domestic tranquility. This means the government will maintain peace, which is tranquility means peace, and order within the nation. Domestic is a term that think of it as it's the opposite of foreign. So they're protecting our nation here, the land here, not a foreign nation.
Sometimes I hear foreign terrorism or domestic terrorism.
And that, if it's domestic, it's here. It's
here.
Within our country,
Yes.
right? So they want to ensure peace in our nation. Provide for the common defense. This means the government will protect the nation from external or foreign threats. To promote the general welfare. Well, we've kind of talked about general welfare before, but this means basically that the government will work to improve the overall well-being of the citizens. Think of it as the citizens of the country as a whole, not just specific citizens. General welfare. Secure the blessings of liberty. This means the government will protect individual freedoms. Remember, liberty means freedom. So they're going to protect individual freedoms for both current and future generations. That's where the word posterity comes into. Posterity refers to the future. And then finally, do ordain and establish. This phrase emphasizes that the Constitution is a document created by the people and for the people, establishing a new system of government.
That's what your 8th grade students did?
I used to go through this with them, and I did that because I felt like people hear these words, but they never...
You just race through it when you're reading.
Yeah, you don't really stop to think. You just think of it as words, I think, and not... It really has meaning. It kind of, it's an outline of what the Constitution is going to do and what this government is supposed to do for we the people. In our next episode, we're going to take a look at the Electoral College.
Oh, boy.
Slavery and the Bill of Rights.
I think I already know how you feel about the Electoral College.
Yeah, and remember, it's not a place of higher learning.
Right. One thing, and why sometimes a president's elected and still loses the popular vote. So
right.
I'm looking forward to that one.
And we're going to try to do all those things in the next one.
It may end up being a two-parter.
It may.
I'm okay
Sometimes
with that.
I'm a little overambitious, but
I think that's okay. I think that's going to be another complex subject that we can take our time with and let it breathe a little bit. All right, so are you ready? It's time for the pop quiz. Bueller.
all right. Last episode's question: what are 2 rights mentioned in the Declaration of Independence? If you said life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, you get the points. So either any of those, or maybe you could name all of them.
I hope everyone at least got one of them.
Right.
Yeah, those 3 things: life, liberty, pursuit of happiness.
Our natural right.
Speaking of natural, the questions you ask, just as a reminder, tell us where those come from.
They come from the actual U.S. naturalization tests that new citizens have to pass. They're not asked all of these questions. They're asked a percentage of them, but they don't know which ones they're going to be asked.
Right, so they have to prep.
So they have to prep, and there are 100 on the actual practice tests. So they have to be able to answer those. And sadly, I'm sure that I'm correct in saying most natural citizens could not answer.
Right. No, I totally agree with that. I think that's fair.
Which is sad.
It
so
is
hopefully
sad.
they're listening and learning some stuff here.
I hope so. Our numbers are going up, so thank you for listening. What's the next question?
So the question for this time is, what is meant by freedom of religion? It's mentioned in our First Amendment. It's one of those rights that we have. So what does it mean, freedom of religion?
And you can go to our Facebook page, Plain Civics. Check it out. We post the answers. We've got some other links on there. Sometimes we mention throughout the episode, and you can meet my 4 dogs. Very good. All right. Well, thank you for putting this together. I think we talked about this before we started, but with the preamble of the Constitution of the United States in here, this was a fun one. So thank you for that. And I want to say thank you to the Logansport Cass County Public Library once again. We're here to record, and we thank them for their hospitality and the facilities. That's it for this episode of Plain Civics, breaking down the basics, no politics, just facts. Thanks for listening, and until next time, stay informed and stay engaged.
This is Plain Civics. Join us for the journey as we break down the basics of how government works, so you can make the government work for you.